Good morning, Moirai V'Rabosai, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly shir. This Shabbos, this week, of course, is Parsaht Toldot. If you have a chumash in front of you, you can open your chumashim to Perek Chaf Zayin, Pasuk Aleph. This is one of the most famous and the most difficult to understand, and really the most surprising stories in all of Chumash. It's the famous story of Yaakov and Esav. Yitzchak wants to give the brachas to his son Esav. Yitzchak's wife Rivka believes that the brachas should go to their son Yaakov. Yitzchak plans to give the brachas to Esav. In the end, Rivka orchestrates this trick, and Yaakov pretends to be Esav. He doesn't just pretend, he actually claims and says that he's Esav. And in the end, Yaakov is the one who gets the brachas. The story, the Torah presents the story here in Perek Chaf Zayin, beginning in Pasuk Aleph in the following way. The Pasuk says, Vayehi ki zoken Yitzchak. It was when Yitzchak was old. It was when Yitzchak was old. Vaticheno einov meira'os. His eyes became dimmed. His vision was impaired. Vayikro es Esav b'noi hagodol. He calls Esav his big son, his older son. Vayomer elav b'ni, vayomer elav hineni, and he says, "My son." Esav says, "Here I am." And Yitzchak tells him, "Go out and prepare some food and bring it to me, and I'm going to bless you." But this is the first time that the Torah has told us that Yitzchak has a vision issue, that he's got challenges in his eyes. So Rashi jumps here to fill in. How did it come about? What's the context of Yitzchak's challenges in the realm of vision? Rashi gives three explanations. Vaticheno, says Rashi, number one, be'oshnon shel elu. The first explanation is that Yitzchak's eyes were dim. He was vision impaired. His vision was impaired because of the smoke of the avodah zarah of Esav's wives, or of Esav himself, who were offering incense and different sacrifices to avodah zarah. The smoke that came up damaged Yitzchak's eyesight. That's the first explanation of Rashi. The third explanation of Rashi is that Hashem dimmed Yitzchak's eyes so that Yaakov would be able to come and take the brachas, as the Torah continues to tell. Yaakov pretends to be Esav, and Yitzchak apparently is fooled. He's duped into believing that Yaakov in fact is Esav. Obviously, if he could see clearly, he wouldn't be able to be fooled or duped this way. And so Hashem made it this way in order for Yaakov to be able to take the brachas. I want to focus and study with you today the second reason, the one that Rashi gives in the middle. Again, the first one is it was from the smoke of avodah zarah. The third one is that it was just like a supernatural act that Hashem did in order for Yaakov to take the brachas. But let's learn for the next couple of minutes, let's learn Rashi's second interpretation, because this is mind-blowing. Dovar Acher, says Rashi, if you have it in front of you, follow along. Another explanation number two, why is Yitzchak suffering in his eyes and in his vision? Zot Rashi Amasa, a story. When Yitzchak was tied up on the Mizbeach, and his father Avraham wanted to shecht him, referring, of course, to the Nisayon of the Akedah. At that moment, the heavens opened up. And the angels of heaven, the angels of service, could see the way Yitzchak is lying there, tied up, hands and feet on the Mizbeach. And Aviv Roitzel L'Shachta, his father Avraham wants to shecht him. The angels began to weep. They were emotional. They began to cry. The tears of the Malachim fell. Excuse me. The tears of the Malachim fell onto Yitzchak's eyes. Lefichach kohu einov, and for this reason, his vision became impaired. That's the second out of the three reasons as to what happened to Yitzchak's vision. It all dates back, says Rashi, close to 100 years earlier, to the moment that Yitzchak was bound up on the Akedah and his father wanted to shecht him. At that time, the heavens opened. The Malachim saw what was going on. They started to cry. Their tears fell in Yitzchak's eyes. And that's why the Torah tells us now, Kohu Einov, that his eyes and his vision was impaired. It's unclear from Rashi what this actually means in terms of at which point was his vision impaired. Does Rashi mean that since the day of the Akedah, Yitzchak's vision was damaged? Because of the experience of the tears of the Malachim falling on his eyes, he's been blind since the experience of the Akedah. Again, remember at this point, Yitzchak is more than 120 years old. At the story of the brachas, Yitzchak is more than 120. The brachas happened when Yitzchak was 37. So does Rashi mean that Yitzchak has been struggling with his vision since the age of 37? Is that what Rashi means? Or does Rashi mean that it was like a delayed reaction? The tears landed in Yitzchak's eyes when he was 37, and it sort of stayed there, and only later on, when he was more than 120, did it start to do real damage? Unclear. And seemingly not relevant for now. Doesn't matter what happened between when he was 37 and now. The point is that now Yitzchak considers himself old. He says, my mother died at 127. I'm getting close to the age of my mother's death. He considers himself old, and his vision is damaged. Why? Rashi says, according to the second reason, according to the second explanation, Rashi says because the Malachim cried during the Akedah, and their tears fell in his eyes and damaged his vision. All right. Now, this is one of Rashi's explanations. The questions here are so incredibly obvious that they sort of jump out at the page. You don't need any kind of a Chumash teacher or any kind of teacher at all to ask the questions. They're just so incredibly obvious. But let's ask them anyways, because this stuff is just. It seems impossible to understand. Let's ask them anyways. Number one, Rashi says, this goes back to Yitzchak being tied up on the Akedah, and his father wanted to shecht him. Question number one, his father wanted to shecht him? Really? It's true that Abraham was prepared to shecht him. It's true that Abraham was prepared to follow Hashem's instructions. It's true that Abraham passed the test. All of that is true. But to say that Abraham wanted to shecht him, why would Rashi say such a thing? And what's the basis of that? Who says Abraham wanted to shecht him? In fact, we have proof, we have indication that Abraham didn't want to shecht him. Again, he was prepared to. That's not disputed. But that he wanted to, we have proof seemingly from the pasuk that he didn't want to. There's an expression in the story of the Akedah. The pasuk says, "Vayishlach Avram es yodai, vayikach samachelas." When he grabs the knife, it says Avram sends his hand and takes the knife, which is a strange thing to say. What do you mean? When you pick up a cup of coffee, do you say, "I sent my hand and I picked up a cup of coffee"? You reach for the coffee. What's Vayishlach Avram es yodai? One of the explanations is that at some level, Abraham knew that Hashem didn't want him to shecht Yitzchak. His body was accustomed to responding to Hashem's will. At some level, he knew that this wasn't going to happen, so he had to force his hand. Be it as it may, question number one, why does it say that Abraham wanted to shecht Yitzchak? Question number two, at that moment, says Rashi, the heavens opened and the angels saw. I see. So until that moment, the angels had no idea what was going on. What does this mean? Angels don't have an awareness of what goes on in the world. I mean, Avraham Avinu is about to pass his 10th and final and greatest test. The Malachim have no idea what's happening. The heavens opened up. The heavens didn't open up on their own. If the heavens opened, it means Hashem opened them because he wanted the Malachim to see. Why did the Malachim not see until then? How did they not know until then? Next, it says, V'hoyu boichim, and they cried. Again, obviously, this is so difficult to understand. Angels are not humans. They don't have human emotions. And even if they do, they don't have physical bodies. They don't cry physical tears. Difficult to understand. This part is amazing. It says, the Yordu Dimaiseyim v'noflu al Einov. They cried in such a way that their tears landed punkt on Yitzchak's eyes. So let me ask you, so Yitzchak couldn't close his eyes to protect his eyes from the tears of the Malachim? The Malachim couldn't move over a couple of inches so their tears would land somewhere else? Punkt. The Malachim couldn't hold their tears. Nobody realized that this is going to be dangerous for Yitzchak's eyes in the future. And we're finding out about this close to 100 years later, and therefore it damaged Yitzchak's vision, lefichach kohu einav, because the Malachim cried tears that landed punkt in Yitzchak's eyes. The biggest challenge here in understanding the Rashi is obviously quoting a medrash, right? Obviously, Rashi is obviously quoting a medrash. The medrash says that at the time of the Akedah, the Malachim cried and the tears landed on Yitzchak's eyes. Okay. The medrash is a medrash. This is what it says in the medrash. The trouble here with Rashi quoting this medrash is that the medrash obviously does not mean this literally. The Malachim cried physical tears and they landed on Yitzchak's eyes. Obviously the medrash doesn't mean that in a physical sense. Obviously not. Malachim are not physical, their tears are not physical, and tears don't make people blind. If tears made people blind, then every time we cried, Rahman, it's time we become blind. So the Medrash obviously doesn't mean this literally, but Rashi is coming to explain the pshat of the pasuk. And Rashi says, you know why Yitzchak had challenges seeing? Either because there was smoke, which is physical smoke, or because Hashem made it that way so Yaakov would take the brachas, or because the Malachim cried. So Rashi seems to be taking this idea, which is meant clearly as a euphemistic, conceptual medrash, and applying it to the pshat of the pasuk, which is just staggering. And also unnecessary. What's the problem here in the pasuk? The pasuk that we need to dig up a medrash about Malachim crying by the Akedah. Why is any of this necessary? The other two explanations of Rashi are perfectly understandable. Why were his eyes suffering? Because his children were offering a korbanos to avoid the Zorah, or ktoiros to avoid the Zorah, or Hashem made it that way, so that Yaakov would come and take the brachas. What's the problem? Why the need to dig up here some medrash and apply it to the simple meaning of the pasuk? Okay. This is the question, this is the idea that I'd like to study with you today. To explain it, I want to take a step back and discuss just for a few minutes a general idea here in the brachas, here in the story. So I think if you stop an average Torah learning yid in the street and you say to them, do you know the story of Yaakov and Esav and the brachas? Yeah, of course. Everybody knows the story, of course. What's the story? Yitzchak loved Esav. He wanted to give the brachas to Esav. Rivka loved Yaakov. She wanted the brachas to go to Yaakov. Mazel tov. What happened? What happened is that Rivka teaches her son Yaakov how to, again, on the surface, lie and cheat and pretend, etc. Go into his father, pretend like he's somebody who he isn't, and get the brachas. Okay. Now, let's not get into the means that Rivka and Yaakov use to get these brachas. the systems that they use, the seemingly blatant lies that go on, the deception, the thievery involved. Let's not get into that for today. Very difficult to understand. Let's leave that alone. Okay. Let's not get into for today why Yitzchak thought that Esav was Azag Groisa Tzaddik, or what exactly he was hoping his brachas would accomplish. Let's not get into that either. I want to ask you a different question. Stop an average Torah studying Jew in the street and say, in the end, the brachas went to Yaakov, yeah? Yeah. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? In the end, the idea that the brachas went to our grandfather Yaakov and not to Esav, is that a good thing or a bad thing? For us, what do you mean? Everybody will say, of course it's a good thing. Instead of Esav getting the brachas, Yaakov got the brachas. Wonderful. Why should Esav get the brachas? Esav is our Rosh, Soina Yisrael. Yaakov is our ancestor. Esav represents all of the anti-Semites in Jewish history. Yaakov is the father of all the Jews. No, who do you want the brachas to go to, Esav or Yaakov? Of course, you want the brachas to go to Yaakov, right? Again, I'm not talking about the means that are used to accomplish this. I'm not getting into does the end justify the means or not. I'm talking about the end itself. The end itself is good or no good. Seemingly on the surface, it's wonderful. In the end, the brachas go to Yaakov. So actually, when you start scratching the surface, it's not that simple at all. I'll tell you something interesting. When I was a young bocher studying in yeshiva, I studied in Montreal, Canada, where my grandmother, Zolzain Gesund, may she live and be well, lived there. And Shabbos afternoon, Parshas Chayesora, I remember having a conversation with her. And she tells me, I'll quote it for you almost verbatim, because I remember what she said. She said, we spoke in Yiddish, of course, and she said to me, I remember something that I heard from my father and Parshas Chayesor. This is my grandmother quoting her father, my great-grandfather, was a Rosh Yeshiva and a Rav. No, I said, your father has a vort in Parshas Chayesor, on Parshas Toldot, excuse me. I'm all ears. What's the vort? You'll excuse me because there's more women on the shiur here than men. But the vort goes like this. He said, quote, Weiber machen als Kalya. Anybody here know what that means? Weiber machen als Kalya. Women ruin everything. I'm listening. He said Rivka should have never gotten involved. And Yaakov should have given the brachas to Esav. Yitzchak should have given the brachas to Esav exactly as he intended. You want to know why? She says to me, you got to study Chumash and Rashi. Look later on, when the whole thing, toward the end of the whole story, after Yaakov takes the brachas, and after Esav comes in and realizes that he's been robbed and duped, and when it's almost all over, and Esav is begging his father for a bracha, he says, please, ha-bracha achas, do you only have one bracha? Please bless me as well. And Yitzchak says to him, listen, what can I give you? Hein gvir samtivloch, I already made your brother, Yaakov, a balabas over you. Rashi says, kol mashakona eved kona rabbi. Whatever a servant owns is owned by his master. Whatever I bless you with is just going to go straight to your brother Yaakov. It's a waste. Esav begs and pleads and cries. In the end, Yaakov blesses Esav as well. Look inside the Chumash, Perek Chav Zayin Pasuk Lametes. Vayan Yitzchak Avi Vayomer Lav. Yitzchak says, all right, I'll give you a brach. You should also live in a place where there's fat of the land. Mitala Shemayim Ayol, and there should be dew. You'll live on your sword. You'll serve your brother because I already made him the boss over you, quote, V'hoyo kasher torit, it shall be when he goes down, uporakto uloi meyal tzavarecha. At this stage, we feel like we're at the end of the story. People gloss over the pasuk and they don't even listen to what's being read. Yitzchak tells Esav, I made your brother the boss over you. You are going to be his servant. You're going to be his slave. I can't bless you with anything because anything that I bless you with will automatically go to him. Masha kono eved kono rabbi. Whatever a slave owns is owned by his master. Yitzchak tells Esav, I made you Yaakov's slave. You'll have to live by your sword. You'll worship your brother. You have no choice. And then right at the end, in typical classic legal style, Yitzchak throws a clause in there. V'hoyo kasher torid uporakto uloi meyal tzavarecha. It shall be if he, Yaakov, goes down, you will cast his yoke off from your neck. Says Rashi, whoa, what does that mean? What do you mean if he goes down, you'll cast his yoke off your neck? Well, what's that even saying? Says Rashi, among other things, Kishayavru Yisrael al HaTorah. It means, says Rashi, that Yitzchak told Esav, when the Jewish people will transgress the words of the Torah, then you, Esav, will have a good argument over the brachas that were taken away from you. Then, uparakta uloi, you will cast off his yoke. End of bracha. And everybody rushes through this part. The next thing the Torah says, Esav says to himself, I'm going to wait for my father to die, and I'm going to kill Yaakov. And Rivka finds out about it, and she sends Yaakov away, and he goes to Lavan, and there he works for 22 years, and he marries 4 women, and he has 12 sons, and the whole story evolves from there. Wait a second, said my great-grandfather, wait a second, stop. Don't run to the next pasuk. What did you just say? What? Yitzchak told Esav, I gave your brother Yaakov everything. Everything he has, everything you have. There's nothing left for you. Even if I give it to you, you won't have it. I'll make it conditional, says Yitzchak. It's only as long as the Jewish people remain faithful to the Torah. But Yisrael ala Torah, if Chas v'Sholem Jewish people transgress the Torah, uparakta uloi, then you, Esav, will cast off the yoke and you'll be free and you'll be justified in being free. You'll argue, says Yitzchak to his son Esav, that the Jewish people are not entitled to the brachas if they transgress the words of the Torah. Complained the Rosh Yeshiva, complained my great-grandfather. He said, Weiber machen als Kalya. In the end, Rivka ruined the whole thing. You see, Yitzchak's plan was the other way around. Yitzchak's plan was to give all the brachas to Esav. And then when Yaakov comes in, Yitzchak would tell Yaakov, all those brachas that I gave Esav, they're all on the condition that Esav keeps the Torah. They're all on the condition that Esav does what he's supposed to do. They're all on the condition that Esav is a good boy, and he doesn't kill, and he doesn't steal, and he doesn't rape, and he doesn't pillage, and he doesn't lie, and he doesn't do anything he's not supposed to. But if Esav doesn't behave himself, then of course you, Yaakov, can have all the brachas. That was Yitzchak's plan. It was foolproof. What are the chances that Esav is going to be deserving of these brachas? Esav is a cold-blooded murderer. Esav is a Sonei Yisrael. Yitzchak, So Yitzchak's plan was, it's like they say, when you sign a contract, you have to read all the way till the last clause. You have to read till the end. What's the last line of the contract? The last line of the contract is that all of this is true if so-and-so does X, Y, Z, and A, B, C happens, and if not, the whole thing is null and void. In fact, it's the other way around. That's basically what Yitzchak is doing here. So again, Yitzchak's plan, this is one of the explanations of the story. Yitzchak's plan was to give the bracha to Esav and make that conditional. And say, again, Yitzchak's plan was to give the brachas to Esav and make that conditional and say, Esav will get all the brachas in the world if he's a tzaddik. Esav is a tzaddik. Esav is nishkein tzaddik. So what would happen? Esav wouldn't not be deserving of the brachas. And then Yitzchak would turn to Yaakov and say, if your brother doesn't deserve the brachas, then you get all the brachas. Yaakov would get all the brachas. Instead, Rivka sets up, the whole says, no, we can't do that. We got to make sure Yaakov gets the brachas. So they trick Yitzchak. And they send Yaakov in there, masquerading as Esav. Yitzchak falls for it. So he thinks to himself, Esav zal haben alle, he gives him all the brachas. With the intention of making it conditional on Esav's behavior. Unbeknown to him, he gives the brachas to Yaakov. And then Esav walks in. So Yitzchak flips it. And Yitzchak says, okay, I've given all the brachas, he tells Esav, the son he loves, I've given all the brachas to your brother. Ha-bracha achasi l'cha, I only have one bracha left. And you know what it is? That all of my brachas to the Jewish people, to Yaakov and all their descendants, will be on the condition that they keep Torah mitzvahs. But if they're found spiritually wanting, if they're found spiritually imperfect, if you, Esav, find the ability to criticize the Jews in their commitment to Torah mitzvahs, then says Yitzchak to Esav, I give you the right to challenge the Jewish people's claim and ownership to the brachas. You will have an argument. You'll have you'll have a trump card. You'll cast the yoke of your brother Yaakov off your neck, and you will terrorize your brother Yaakov. Need I tell you, Moirai v'Rabosai, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what happened. And the Jewish people over the course of their history have suffered terribly at the hands of the Esavs of the world. And so this begs the question. What kind of a bracha is this? In the end, even in the end, in the final product, what did Yitzchak do to us? Make all these brachas conditional? And if not, then what's Yitzchak saying? Then Esav has the right to take them away from us? So now Esav is now, for all of history, Esav is now sitting in judgment, going, do the Jewish people deserve the brachas or not? Seems like Yitzchak should have done us a favor, given us less brachas, and made them unconditional. And what kind of a father does that to his son? I'll give you all the brachas in the world on condition X. And if not, your brother who hates you and wants to destroy you, he'll be entitled to the brachas and terrorize you. Rahman al-Islam. And yet this is exactly what happens. It's incredibly difficult to understand. Again, the question I'm asking here is, in the end, even after Yitzchak gives the brachas to Yaakov, Yitzchak makes them conditional on Yaakov's adherence to Torah mitzvahs. Yitzchak's adherence to Torah, Yitzchak makes the brachas conditional to Yaakov's adherence to Torah mitzvahs and gives Esav the right to challenge whether Yaakov is adhering properly or not. And if not, Esav has the right to cast his yoke off of his neck. Which seems like not much of a bracha at all. All right. So here is, again, of them, I mean, you can give 1,000 shiurim on this story of the brachas, and then, they're going to Yaakov and not to Esav. You can give 1,000 shiurim on it. But here's an insight. And I think there's something very deep hidden here in the words of Rashi, that the Malachim are standing on top of Yitzchak while he's on the Akedah and they're crying. And the tears are going into his eyes and blinding him. What in heaven's name does this mean? Because I think this Rashi, that the tears at the time of the Akedah blinded Yitzchak, or not blinded him, but damaged his vision. I think Rashi is giving us a key to understanding Yitzchak's motivation and a way to understand the entire story of the brachas and everything that's going on here. I want to give you one more introduction. All right, one more introduction. This is a Gemara that I quoted in one of our Shabbos shiurim. For those of you who were there, I beg your indulgence as I repeat it, but it's an amazing story. I'll repeat it briefly because many of you heard it from me within the past couple of weeks. The Gemara says in Masechta Brachas that the famous Navi Yeshayahu gave Musar to a king who lived in his time called Chizkiyahu. Yeshayahu, says the Gemara in Brachas, comes to Chizkiyahu one day and tells him, "You're going to die." Why? He said, because it was lo yasakta b'piri v'rivit. You didn't have any children. You didn't have any children. So the Gemara says like this: Chizkiyahu, king of the Jews, the Gemara says he was such a great tzaddik, Hashem wanted to make him Mashiach. The Gemara says Chizkiyahu told Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah the prophet, he told him, "You're right. There's a mitzvah that I have neglected to keep. But I want to tell you why." He said, "You know why I didn't keep the mitzvah of having children? Because I," says King Chizkiyahu, "can see through prophecy that if I have a child, he's going to be such a terrible, vile, evil Rasha. He's going to bring such misfortune and calamity upon the Jewish people that he's going to destroy everything. And so I'd rather swallow this. I'd rather go to Gehenna, so to speak," says Chizkiyahu, "and take this Avera upon myself and not hurt Klal Yisrael by having the kind of child that I see in my future I'm destined to have." Very noble, very righteous. Which human being doesn't want to have children? Chizkiyahu said, "I want to have children, but I can see through prophecy." He's a tzaddik in his own right. "I can see through prophecy that my child's going to be a vile human being. I don't want to bring such a person into this world. So I've chosen to abstain." Yeshayahu tells him, "You're wrong." He said those famous words, "Bahadi kavsha derachmon olam olach." He said, "You don't make God's calculations. You have a mitzvah to have children, have children. Whatever happens with them, happens with them. So be it." Chizkiyahu says, "Okay, if you're so confident in what you're saying, how about I marry your daughter?" "How about I marry you?" He says to Yeshayahu, "How about I marry your daughter?" The shidduch is arranged. Chizkiyahu marries Yeshayahu's daughter. Her name is Cheftzibah. And they have a son. They have more than one, but they have one very famous son. And the son's name is Menashe. And true to Chizkiyahu's prophecy, Menashe, in 55 years of leadership, of being a king over the Jewish people, decimates, destroys, and is destructive of the very fabric of the Jewish people, physically and spiritually, torments the Jews in heinous ways. He basically, single-handedly, is responsible for the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. The reason why I say basically is because the one who finished the job was his son, was Menashe's son, who was even a bigger murderer and a bigger idol worshiper and a bigger no-goodnik than he was, who within 5 to 10 years after Menashe's passing, the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed and it's over. And Yeshayahu Hanavi, the one who was really single-handedly responsible for Menashe's existence, because he went to Chizkiyahu, the king, to tell him to have children, and he told him, you don't make God's calculations, whatever is meant to be is meant to be, and this is it. Yeshayahu Hanavi, in the end, is put to death by Menashe himself. Menashe puts his own grandfather Yeshayahu to death, he kills him. This is a story in the Gemara. I mean, this is a story that the Gemara relates. Why does the Gemara relate the story? Not just to teach us about Jewish history, but because to teach us there's a very powerful lesson there. And the lesson is that sometimes a person can see through prophecy, in this case, Chizkiyahu, can see through prophecy that an action that I'm going to do now is going to have disastrous consequences down the line. Terrible. Had Menashe not come into existence, the Jewish people would have been better off in every way. Physically, spiritually, again, according to Chazal, the first Beis Hamikdash would have lasted much longer, or who knows if it would have ever been destroyed. Everything would have been better for the Jewish people. And Chizkiyahu knew this, and therefore he had every intent of not having children. And Yeshayahu, the Navi of the time, gave him Musar and said, you have no right. Have this child, and whatever is meant to be will be. And that's what happened. And the child killed Yeshayahu, who was responsible for his existence in the future. But the Gemara tells the story because it's the Gemara's way of saying that even when we see the future, sometimes we don't understand what we're seeing. Even when Chizkiyahu looks out and sees a son who at the surface will decimate and destroy the Jewish people, Yeshayahu tells him, don't forget you're only human. Don't forget your own limitations. Don't make God's calculations. God doesn't need accountants, and he doesn't need attorneys, and he doesn't need help. You fulfill the mitzvah that is upon you, and that's the end of it. In a sense, you have a similar, based on this idea, you have a similar sense going on here with the Akedah. Avraham Avinu takes Yitzchak and he ties him up and he puts him on the Akedah. And he's about to shecht him. Hashem told him to, or at least he thought Hashem told him to. If he shechts Yitzchak, the Jewish nation will never materialize. There won't be a Jewish people. The purpose of the world, the purpose of all of existence, nothing will come from this. Nothing. All the other converts that Abraham makes, nothing will come of them. The only one who's going to last is Yitzchak. Even Hashem's promise to Abraham was that he would have children from Yitzchak. If Abraham shechts Yitzchak, nothing will come from that too. In the end, Yitzchak is saved, the Jewish people are saved, and everything is fine. So what was the purpose of the Akedah? Well, it was one of the tests that Hashem gave Abraham. But what was the purpose of it? It was that moment that Abraham was prepared to shecht Yitzchak, in which Abraham displayed this type of Mesiras Nefesh, where he was basically saying to Hashem, look, all of the cheshbonos, all of the calculations that I could see. Avraham was also a prophet. Hashem spoke to him directly. Hashem told him, you're going to have children from Yitzchak. Now Avraham Avinu says, now Hashem wants me to shecht Yitzchak. I don't need to make God's calculations. I don't need to figure out God's master plan. I need to follow Hashem's instructions to me now. This is what Hashem wants me to do now. This is what I want to do now. And Yitzchak lying there, the ancestor of all of the Jewish people, Yitzchak lying there must have also had this conflict within himself. On the one hand, Yitzchak also had the Ruach HaKodesh. Yitzchak was a prophet too. God spoke to Yitzchak as well. Yitzchak didn't know that he was going to produce all of Klal Yisrael. Of course he knew. And now he's lying there with a knife to his throat. At that moment, the secret of Mesiras Nefesh of a Jew, the secret of the Neshama of a Yid was released. This is the greatest test. And they passed it, meaning to say, at this moment they committed themselves and they said, the Ribbono Shel Olam has a plan that's bigger than anything we can see. Even a tzaddik, even Avraham Avinu, even Yitzchak Avinu, even Chizkiyahu, who was worthy of being Mashiach. Even individuals who have prophecy and Ruach HaKodesh and foresight for all of eternity. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara says he could see all the way till Tchias HaMeisim. The moment of the Akedah was the moment where they said, we trust that the Ribbono Shel Olam can see things we can't see. There's a bigger picture. They let go of everything they saw. They let go of what we call all of their cheshbonos shel kedusha, their holy calculations. They let go of it all and they said the Ribbono Shel Olam has a bigger plan. In the words of Rashi, Rashi says Avraham could have come to Hashem and said, I cannot shecht my son because you, Hashem, promised me that I'm going to have children through Yitzchak. Right? What better argument is there not to do something than by saying it's the will of God that I not do this? He had every possible cheshbon and calculation to not do it. The Nisayon of the Akedah was that Avraham and Yitzchak both said, we don't know, we don't understand. There's things here that are bigger than what we can see, even though we can see the future and all the future. There's stuff here that's operating, that's bigger and greater than our perception. And they eased themselves, and they allowed themselves, at least for that moment, to believe that Avraham was going to shecht Yitzchak. Says the Medrash, obviously not physically, but so to speak, spiritually. The Malachim are standing there in heaven and they're crying. What does it mean? Why does a person cry? Why does a person cry? We cry when we experience something that's so intense, that's so deep, we can't express it verbally. We can't express it even to ourselves verbally. We cannot understand what it is that's going on. There's something that's happening here that's beyond our own comprehension. It's either too painful, or it's too joyous, or it's in some way it's intense. People don't only cry because they're in pain or they're sad. They cry for all sorts of reasons. People sometimes, it's a human reaction. When something happens that's bigger than me, I cannot digest it. It results in tears. Niftachu hashamayim, says Rashi. The heavens were torn open at this point of the Akedah. Every spiritual barrier is removed. The Ribbono Shel Olam, Hashem, is up. All of Jewish history is playing out here in this moment of the Akedah. What's happening? What's happening is a Jew is sticking out his neck, literally, and saying, Ribbono Shel Olam, I accept my destiny, no matter what it is. I trust you, the Rabbeinu Shalom, with the very essence of my being. Come what may. Ano avda the kudsha brichu. I'm a servant of Hashem. Whatever happens, happens. The Malachim are crying. They've never seen such a thing. This type of commitment of a Yid, this type of neshama mesiras nefesh, that goes beyond their own prophecy, that goes beyond their own ruach hakodesh, that goes beyond to allow themselves to open themselves up to a connection to Hashem, which defies any kind of calculation. The Malachim are crying. I saw there's a commentary written by the Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer is the son of the Chassam Sofer. The Ksav Sofer writes, you know why the Malachim cried? The Malachim cried because they knew that they as Malachim will never be able to get to such a level of commitment to Hashem. A Malach can fulfill a mission. You tell a Malach what to do, the Malach can do it. But there has to be some kind of a structure to the mission. There has to be some type of conceivable structure. The Malach has to know what it is that he's supposed to do. Just to have Mesiras Nefesh, just to lose one's life without seemingly any purpose, without anything coming of it. The only thing it seems that would come of it is the destruction of the Jewish people and the destruction of Hashem's promise that children would be born through Yitzchak. A Malach cannot do that. So the Malachim are crying in heaven. Says the Medrash, and their tears burn Yitzchak's eyes, and his vision is impaired forever. Was it a bad thing that Yitzchak's vision was impaired forever? For the rest of his life? Of course not. Malachim's tears don't hurt anybody. Malachim's tears don't do damage. Malachim are emissaries and angels of Hashem. They're not even physical tears. What does it mean? It means that the moment of the Akedah burned itself into Yitzchak's psyche so deeply, into the very essence of the first person to be born a Jew. He carried it with him for the rest of his life. And his vision was impaired. What does it mean? It means that as a Yid, he knew that his existence was connected to the supernatural. It means that he knew that although he had to be prepared to die with Mesiras Nefesh, and he was prepared to die with Mesiras Nefesh, the Rabbeinu Shalom would save him at every point in his life, and from him would come the greatest nation on earth, a generation of Jews who for all eternity would be exactly like him. Jews prepared to die on the Kiddush Hashem. And amazingly, b'chol dor v'dor, HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzileinu miyodam, the Rabbeinu Shalom would save them from the Esavs again and again. Says Rashi, make no mistake, Yitzchak's impaired vision is not a bad thing. Yitzchak's impaired vision is not a handicap. Yitzchak's impaired vision doesn't mean that he's not aware. Oh boy, is he aware. He's aware like nobody else. What is he aware of? He's aware that our vision sees only half the story. He's aware that what we see in front of us today is here today and gone tomorrow. Yitzchak says, I was there on the Akedah. I know what it means for a Jew to be ready to risk their life for Hashem. I know that a Jew is connected to an eternal God in a way that no vision, even the vision of Avraham and Yitzchak and Chizkiyahu, who is ready to be Mashiach and Yeshayahu the prophet, nobody can see it. Vaticheno Einov Meir means that Yitzchak operated on a level that was beyond vision. He had the Malachim's tears in his eyes from the moment of the Akedah. Wherever he looked at, whatever he saw it from the perspective of the tears of the Malachim. He saw all of Jewish history from that person. He saw the eternal, miraculous nature of the existence of the Jew. He saw the indestructible nature of the Jew. And because of that, Hashem made it that way, or specifically because of that. In the end, the brachas go to Yaakov, not Esav. Why did Yitzchak want the brachas to go to Esav? Separate question. But it's because of Yitzchak's, because of the tears in because of the tears of the Malachim, so to speak, burning, but burning in a positive sense, burning with the fire of the neshama in Yitzchak's eyes. That's in the end why the bracha goes to Yaakov. Where Yitzchak looks at his son Yaakov, the father of the Jewish people, and says, my dear son Yaakov, you're going to be an extension of me. You, Yaakov, you're gonna be my son Yitzchak. From you will come Klal Yisrael. And he blesses him, but he makes his bracha conditional. He makes his bracha conditional, and he says, my bracha to Yaakov is only as long as he remains true to the Torah. If not, Esav will cast his yoke off his neck. I'll tell you why. I got 3 minutes left. You know why Esav casts the yoke of Yaakov off his neck when Yaakov forgets to fulfill the Torah? You know why sometimes the world looks at a Jew and goes, you dirty Jew? I don't know why. Only Hashem knows why. But sometimes it's necessary to serve as a reminder. Sometimes if a Jew, Rahman al-Islam, gets too comfortable in Esav's garments, sometimes if a Jew gets too comfortable in the world, they need a shtickle reminder. So Yitzchak blesses his son Yaakov and says, I bless you. You should always know who you are. You know who you are? You're a Jew lying on the Mizbeach by the Akedah. You're a Jew ready to die by Mesiras Nefesh to Hashem. And because of that, you're indestructible for all eternity. And if you should chas v'sholem, but for a moment, forget that, Esav will cast your yoke off his neck, turn around and call you all sorts of things. B'chol doir v'doir, in every generation there will be a reminder of this. But the moment a Yid remembers who it is that we are, our existence, our essence, the moment we remember we're a Jew lying on the Akedah with our heart, with our hands and feet bound up, ready for our destiny, we're in the hands of Hashem. The moment we remember that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matzileinu Miyodim, then everything is saved. Look what is going to be the story now for the next 2-3 decades with Yaakov's life. He's going to battle now that he's gotten these brachas, now that he's been appointed and empowered as Yitzchak's extension. He's going to battle with the Lovans of the world. He's going to battle with the Esavs of the world. He's going to battle with every anti-Semite and every obstacle. And what will come from it? 4 wives, 12 sons, tzaddikim, a family of 70, who will then go down to Mitzrayim and emerge as a nation of 2 to 3 million. And then receive the Torah. And the story of Jewish history begins. The moment Yitzchak gives the brachas to Yaakov, he elevates Yaakov to that level, to that place. He brings him right back to that moment of the Akedah, where from then on and for all eternity, Jews became, the expression in Chazal is that Yitzchak was an Oila Tmima. Yitzchak was an Oila Tmima means he was like a burnt sacrifice, an offering to Hashem. He was like a sacrifice that had been brought up to Hashem, a korban that had been sacrificed. What does that mean? It means his physical manifestation was so miraculous. It was so beyond nature and yet he lived it every second. Yitzchak, for the rest of his life, was a walking miracle on 2 feet. The moment he gave these brachas to Yaakov, Yaakov is elevated to that level too. And Yitzchak tells him, you always have to study the Torah. You always have to remember who you are. Hold on to your destiny, to your existence, to your essence. And as long as you do, Esav will worship the ground you walk on. Esav will be subservient to you. Forget who you are, Rahman al-Islam. Esav will be right there to remind you. Cast your yoke off his neck and say, if you're not connected, if you don't realize your connection to Hashem, if you don't realize your supernatural existence, Esav will wipe you out in a second. Oh, says the Jew, you're right. You're right. I forgot who I am. Who am I? A descendant of Avraham, a descendant of Yitzchak, a descendant of Yaakov. Jews, our forefathers who paved the way for all of us to understand the true, natural, miraculous existence of a Jew. It's the greatest lesson that we teach our children and we learn from this parsha. The purpose of learning these stories, the purpose of hearing them and internalizing them, is to carry them with us in every aspect of our lives. We don't face Esavs the way they did in previous generations, but we face them in our own way. And every time we do, we have to remember, we got to go back. When we face this kind of challenges, we got to go right back to our own essence. Who are we in essence? In essence, every one of us is a Yitzchak on the Akedah. A Yitzchak on the Akedah who looks up to the heaven and says, Rabbeinu Shalom, my neshama, my essence is connected to you so powerfully that I fear nothing. The Rabbeinu Shalom makes us indestructible, just like Hashem is indestructible. The Malachim say this is unfathomable. This is not just not human. It's even beyond the realm of angels. The Malachim cry. They can't handle seeing such a level of connection, such a level of anything that surpasses, a connection that surpasses any type of limitations. And the Jew takes those tears of the angels and we put them in our eyes and we carry them with us through every experience. And we look at it this way. We see our own indestructible nature as Jews in the world. We see the world this way. The world is here just to facilitate that. And with Hashem's help, we're able to fulfill our godly mission in this world at every step of the way, with every challenge that comes our way. Have a wonderful Shabbos.